All right, hi English 10-1s. Welcome back to this video series on writing a critical analytical essay, focusing in on Romeo and Juliet, the play. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit more about how you close things off in your paper, specifically to look at how do you bridge gaps between sections of your body paragraphs or across your body paragraphs. How do you use some transitions in a good way? We're going to revisit that this week. I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about conclusions and the things that people do to point back to their argument, but not in a way that's boring or just a repetition of what's already come before. Then I want to just give you a couple of directions you can go, a few strategies you can use to revise your papers. And so that's that step of your writing. It happens all through your writing, that you work on the ideas, that you think about the way it fits together, but especially kind of towards the end as your paper's coalescing, as you have a really good idea that you followed through now a few places, we're getting into the refinement phase of your communication. You're making it better and better. You're making it more and more effective. And so there's a bunch of strategies you can choose from to help you in that process. And not every single one will work for you every single time. You want to have a lot of options in your tool belt. Okay, so the first things first, one great resource that is always important as a writer is to do reading of other writers. And so if at any stage in your essay you feel like you're stalled, like you just feel like, I don't think I'm getting any better with this, or I feel like I'm returning to the same issues again and again, one of the first things I'm going to encourage you to do is to look at pieces of writing that do things really well, that have strong voice, that have strong ideas, and that are strongly linked together or have strong coherence and continuity. I've given you a couple papers that can help you with this on pages 23 to 26 of your course pack for Romeo and Juliet. You can find papers all over the place online. There's lots of good resources, but I would recommend you read the excellent paper and see what's being done really well in that paper. Now, it's not perfect, but it does have a lot of very good features that you can check out and see how they're functioning, especially this conclusion section of the paper. The other bit that I'm going to give you today as a tool is building off of last week's video, which talked about visualization and seeing the parts of your paper sort of lined up, having a picture in your head about the way things are organized, and returning to your focus idea in the little sort of blackout section of each of those mini segments. Today, we're talking conclusions, which is that final triangle. And this time, instead of it being like the introduction, where you had the triangle, well, let me see how I can do that with my fingers, like this, where the triangle was pointing down in your introduction, getting narrower and narrower to your focus. Your conclusion is the opposite of that, right? It's a nice like little symmetrical sort of reflection in a mirror. So you're actually doing a proper triangle in your mind in terms of the conclusion, where the focus is really tight and right on your thesis at the beginning. You're still focused, but you're building a broader base for why that tip of your idea matters. And so if you think of that broadening triangle, it's about the relevance, getting back to the reader, to reach the reader where they are at, so that whatever you have argued about Romeo and Juliet doesn't just stay in that tiny place of only the play, but instead it's a reminder in your conclusion that that idea about people that was true for characters in that story by Shakespeare, that idea has a bigger significance for human beings. So that broad base, it's not getting wishy-washy, it's not just repeating what you said before, it's revisiting your arguments, pointing back at your structures calling back to those structures you already put in your paper, the sections you played, that played a part in your argument. And you're now drawing the reader's attention to why that issue matters for people at the very end. It doesn't have to be a personal connection, though you're welcome to do that, but it doesn't have to be a personal connection like in your own life. You can talk about the trend for human beings. Okay, so that's really what a conclusion's job is. I'm going to encourage you to look at those exemplars on page 23. I'm not going to formally write a conclusion with you in this video because we'll do that in sort of your next series of papers, and you'll certainly do a lot more of that in grade 11 and 12. For right now, the very basic bare bones conclusion will just touch on your argument, and it might be repetition of your thesis. Better conclusions won't just repeat, they'll reframe, and so using new words and synonyms, they'll visit that thesis argument, then they'll visit the structures that you were part of your argumentation, in other words, like your body paragraph bits, and then finally talk about why that matters. What's the so what factor of your focus idea? Whatever's true of Romeo and Juliet, so what? Why do we care as human beings today in our modern world, in our current world? Okay. Now, in order to polish up your piece beyond just being finished, there's a lot of different methods you can use to catch errors, to hear places where your language could be improved, to see visually how you might vary some structures or add better language or imagery to pull out your voice and your personality. The first thing just for catching errors that I find the most helpful is reading out loud. And so I labeled it strategy 1, just read out loud slowly. The first time I do this, I usually do it out loud from top to bottom, and I do read paragraph by paragraph because I'm trying to listen for the argument fitting together, so the argument's coherence and consistency, but I'm also trying to hear what it sounds like and whether my sentences flow together. That's the first strategy. And if you're ever alone in a classroom doing this, or like in an exam or something, and you don't want to be like reading out loud, you feel self-conscious, one thing you can actually try as a strategy is to hear through your jawbone. I know this sounds really weird. Just go with me. Our hearing is amazing because it's done through vibrations are what hit our tympanic membrane, right? So it's done by vibration, the sounds. If you kind of push gently this little piece of your ear so that you kind of close off your ears lightly, like you just go like this. If you whisper, you will actually hear, though you're not vocalizing through your vocal cords, you'll hear the sound, and it's kind of like that sound in your head when you hear a voiceover or you are reading. You might hear sometimes what the words would sound like. It's very soft, and you can actually hear what you're whispering rather than speaking out loud. Little trick, but that's for exams. If we get back to the sort of being in the gym or you're writing in class and you don't want to be self-conscious, you can still read out loud. You just kind of say things quietly. If you close off that canal a little bit so that your ears are covered, you should be able to hear directly through the jawbone. Most people are able to do that. Now, some people can't, and that's okay, right? You might have a different ability set and different wiring in terms of the way that you hear. Not a problem. That's not for everybody. And so there's other methods you can use to catch these same errors. One is to read visually, so not to hear it, but to read your paper out of order. And so instead of hearing what it sounds like, you're going to be reading it from bottom to top. So the very last sentence, and go sentence by sentence up. The goal of that strategy, or strategy number 3, is not to look for coherence, because it's not going to make sense back to front, right? The goal is instead to check the grammar of the independent sentences. And sometimes that only works for you reading your own paper if you break up the argument that you're so familiar with and read things in a weird order. Suddenly you're paying attention to that specific sentence and not to, oh yeah, this is the idea that flowed the way I remember. You're actually paying attention to the words on the page. So reading out of order back to front, it's a weird thing, but it actually does help you to check for grammar. It also helps you to check for sentence variety, to see if every sentence is starting with the same words, like this is shown, this is shown, this is shown. Are you always using that same phrase at the beginning of a sentence? Or are you asking too many questions in a line? Because, you can ask 10 questions, but usually if you're asking more than a couple in the same space, it gets to be less and less effective, right? So you want to have variety in there, and reading backwards, believe it or not, so not one word at a time, but instead one sentence at a time. Going up, that's a really helpful strategy I've found in the past. There's simple things you can do for correctness, and the cups and arms strategy in strategy number 2, there's a hyperlink to the bigger picture of this. Basically, it talks about revision of ideas versus editing for correctness in the cups kind of area. And if you right click on this or click on this link, it'll take you to a bigger version, like a full page outline of that. It's quite a common revision strategy in junior high. And so I encourage you, if you've seen that before, that's a valid way to revise your paper and edit for correctness. The very last thing is a familiar thing too, which is exchange feedback with a friend or a family member. The more times you can get outside eyes on your paper, the more likely it is for you to think about your communication a little differently, to take a different perspective, and to maybe provide details where something made sense to you, so you just forgot to explain it step by step. an outside reader can help to show those gaps in your thinking or in your revision. So that's a really good thing to check out. Now, in terms of gaps, if you find, oh, it looks like I don't have that slide in here. There is also in your little slideshow a bridging the gaps slide. And what that slideshow talks about is making sure your topic and concluding sentence link together. That's a revision thing you can check for as you're reading out loud, going from top to bottom. But it also has some suggestions about how to use better language, better word choice or diction, and also weaving metaphors into your piece. Now, these are pretty advanced strategies. There is a document there that can explain a bit more for you if you want to do the Make It Better little workshop, but that's optional. It's purely for your own growth. So if you want to just save a copy of that Make It Better list and use it next year, that's okay. All right, so you have a lot in front of you that you're able to do. You're able to do some of these revision strategies. You're able to write a conclusion. And then if you still have time and you want to level up even more, there is this lovely Make It Better list here, hyperlinked, that can help you enhance your writing with even more tips and tricks. Okay, so I'm super happy. I'm excited to read your work. Remember this week to check your paper not only against the exemplars so that you kind of get a sense of how it's fitting with the expectations for excellent or for satisfactory, whatever your goal is, but also that you check your paper against the rubric and do a little self-assessment to see if you have the pieces there for each of those categories, from thought and understanding all the way through to that final category of correctness. It's just a really good habit to get into, that you check your own work against that rubric to make sure that you have all the component pieces that you need. Okay, I hope we can cap the video there. I think you got lots that you can experiment with. I'm super excited to read your writing when it's sort of finished this week. And I'd encourage you just to make sure you double check all of the due dates that have been posted on Google Classroom to make sure that you submit your work in time for the deadlines, and so that you have a chance to get feedback. All right, come to our class meets if you'd like any one-on-one assistance. And remember that there's also individual tutorials bookable on Mondays and group tutorials that are just drop-in on Wednesday afternoons between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. Okay, thanks English 10s. I hope you have a marvelous week, and we will see you following this essay writing week for some work on celebratory scenes that we're gonna do. So I'm excited for that as well. Take care, have a great week.